Hi, this week we're going to talk about emotions, and this is Let's Talk Turkey with Jayne Turk. So, emotions are those things that make our lives better and worse, and richer and poorer. And so, we're going to talk about them. But I want to start off by saying that as we talk about them, I want to be sure that we are understanding that this week's topic can be really hard. And there may be some things in here that you're going to struggle with. And so we want to be sure and be kind to ourselves. Always important to be kind to yourself. And well, there are two areas I'm going to focus on this week. I also want to say that there is so much more to emotions than the two things that I'm going to be talking with you about. We could be talking about the language we use to describe our emotions accurately and how the other people involved are perceiving those words that we're choosing. Think I'm a little bit annoyed or I'm enraged, which different people might use the same words to describe the same situation. And other people might be with other people, you might use the a little annoyed when you're really feeling enraged or vice versa. That's another topic. We could be talking about physiology, and there's a lot that goes into what creates our emotions, including, of course, the neurobiology. But we're not. Those are going to be things that I'm going to leave you to research on your own, or maybe we'll talk about another time. Today, we're going to talk about two things. The first one is emotional fallacies, and I want to give you a warning. If you Google this, you will almost inevitably come up with logical fallacies, and so particularly important for tests, but also to understand the material. So emotional fallacies are very different, and logical fallacies are important part of your education. We're not talking about them here. Our other focus is going to be systematic desensitization. So these are both ways of dealing with debilitating emotions, and that's really going to be my focus in this conversation. So let's start by talking about emotional fallacies. Again, they're not logical fallacies. What they are is they come from Albert Ellis, one of the very few theorists whose names I think are important to know, and his assertion that thoughts cause feelings. So let's think about that just for a minute. It often may seem like our emotions are just there. They happen quickly or develop slowly over time, but they are not necessarily triggered by a particular thought. Ellis argues differently. And so he says that we get into the habit of responding with a particular emotion, so we don't have to go through the whole process again, and that oftentimes our emotions are very directly linked to a sequence of events, starting with the activating event, followed by that self-talk, that way that we talk to ourselves in our heads about what's going on, how we analyze and think about things. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, debilitating emotions often come from irrational thoughts. So this is Ellis's big thing, that the emotions that get in the way of us functioning, get in the way of us being happy, often arise from this self-talk that is not based in rationality, or another way of looking at it, self-talk that's not fair. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to other people. And so I want to be clear that we discuss the difference between debilitating and facilitating emotions. So debilitative emotions are the ones that, this is the very technical scientific term, last too long or are too strong and get in the way with us functioning. Facilitative emotions are ones that are shorter and less intense in duration and help us to succeed or move our agendas along. And I can think about a time specifically when I was really mad at a car mechanic who had failed to give me an updated quote and then just insisted I was going to pay this triple price to take my car home when he had not given me the option to not do the work. And I was really poor. I was also 8.5 months pregnant. And so maybe I was emotional for other reasons besides my self-talk, in addition to the self-talk reasons. And I got angry. I was not mean. I did say that I would not be leaving here without my vehicle if that meant that I had to have this baby in his parking lot, but that I knew the law, and the law said that they couldn't do that to me. So in that case, that emotion helped me to be successful. And when we talk about emotions and debilitative and facilitative emotions, they're not all bad, right? So joy can help you facilitate things. Joy can also get in the way of functioning. But I'm less comfortable saying that. I'm sure it's true. I don't think it's a problem. So we'll move on. So you got to start by noting the activating event. The activating event is the first thing that happens, and then you're going to evaluate the self-talk. So the first step in dealing with debilitating emotions is to go back in time and say, okay, what happened? And then what did I say to myself about it? And so when we look at that self-talk, we often find, as Ellis says, we often find that we have fallacies embedded in that. And before I go on, let's define the term fallacies. And the easy way of looking at it is it's a lie. A fallacy is a lie that you tell yourself, or it's a lie that you tell other people, but it's a lie. Or another way of thinking about it is it's not a fair representation of the facts. So if your self-talk is irrational, we've gone back to the activating event, we've looked at the self-talk, and we've said, hey, this isn't fair, this is irrational, then we're going to revise that self-talk. And so that's what we're going to be focusing a lot of our time on today, is talking about what are the fallacies, or at least some of them, and what is a more rational way to think about it. Now, practicing rational self-talk does not automatically make the debilitating emotions go away. It's a process, and it's a process that requires practice. It requires understanding that this is not an immediate fix, and that reevaluating your stance on events is going to be something that's going to take some time. It will immediately give you aspirin level relief of the pain as you work through it, and then commit to that more rational way, that more fair way of thinking. So we're going to practice the noting the activating event, evaluating the self-talk, and coming up with more rational ways of thinking. Okay? So the fallacies that I'm going to focus on are part of the original theory. It's been expanded by so many other theorists besides Ellis. And I think that a lot of those fallacies are useful to look at. I think these basics get us to where we need to be, though. And this is something that's really interesting to you. I hope you do pursue some additional research on it. So I'm going to start. I think there are 5. I'm going to start with the 5 basic fallacies. The first one is the fallacy of perfection. And there are lots of misinterpretations of this one. So I'm going to give you my interpretation and assert that, of course, my interpretation is the right one. The way that I think about the fallacy of perfection is the irrational belief that not only is it possible for you to be perfect, it is possible for you to be perfect all of the time, and that you have an obligation to follow through with that perfection. And I see this in the classroom all the time. So are you one of those people who gets a test result back and you got 98% on the test and you got that A+ on the test, and you're like, wait, where did I miss 2 points? And you feel bad about it. That might be a sign that you're engaging in the fallacy of perfection. As we look on these, we're going to see that a lot of them do overlap, and we can be aware of that. But I wanted to mention that here as we're talking about the very first one, because certainly we're going to see that there is different ways of defining the rational and the irrational. So I was working late in my office, and it had been a very, very, very long day. I think I'd probably been at my office for maybe 15 hours. And it was definitely time for me to go home. And I couldn't find my keys. And I looked everywhere. I tore my office apart. I looked other places in the building. One of my colleagues was there. She helped me look everywhere. My boss showed up. She helped me look. And the running message through my head is, and yes, most of my fallacies do involve profanity, I am such a total fucking idiot. I lost my keys. And that message played over and over and over again in my head. So here's the thing. Not perfect. And I work really hard. And my best needs to be good enough for me. And sometimes that means that things fall through the cracks, including not remembering where I put my keys. And that doesn't make me an idiot. So if you're a person who beats yourself up for not being perfect, what's a more rational way to think about the situation? So if you didn't get that 100% on the test, if when you were cleaning your house, you missed something, if you forgot somebody's birthday, you're not perfect. And that's okay. And that you work really hard and that you try really hard. And you're not perfect. And it's okay. Can be a more rational way of thinking about it. I think probably all of us suffer from some degree of the fallacy of perfection. And maybe that's true of most of these fallacies, at least some of the time. But I think the fallacy of perfection, I put it first because it's one that I think sucks us all in at some times. So the next fallacy is a fallacy of overgeneralization. So overgeneralization is when you take a little example and you spread it out to mean everything. So I also really struggled in math classes as a college student, as a high school student, as an elementary student. In fact, when I was in third grade, they decided that they were just going to stop teaching me math because I was too stupid to actually learn it. And so for several years, I didn't have math classes in elementary school because, I'm a girl and who's going to need it anyway. Fortunately, I had teachers that thought otherwise and required me to do it. And then I get to college and algebra about killed me. And so I ended up changing my major 3 times to avoid statistics. And I still ended up having to take not just statistics, but advanced statistics. So here's the thing. I'm not really bad at math. In fact, not only have I been a corporate treasurer, I've done taxes for myself and my husband and our businesses. I've also done taxes for other people's businesses because some parts of math I'm really good at. What I struggle with is algebraic equations. I struggle with knowing what order to do things in. And if I am specific about that, if I say, instead of I'm bad at math or I suck at math, if instead I say, hey, this is a hard thing for me, that's overcomable. That's something that I can target an approach. I can get a tutor. I can work with the teacher. I can get help with those areas. And then if I do need to use them in the future, I know that this is something I struggle with and I'm going to need some additional help. I had a student say to me one day that she was a bum magnet. Again, overgeneralization. So had she had some bad choices in her dating life? Absolutely. Undeniably. You might have too. But if we overgeneralize, we can't fix the problem. So if we're kinder to ourselves and we're more rational, we say not that, oh, this means I'm a bad student or that I suck at math or that I'm a bad housekeeper or that I'm a bad friend because I forgot your birthday. Instead, if we say, shit, I forgot your birthday. I I can do something about that. I can put it in my calendar. I can put it in my calendar every year for the next 50 years so I never forget again. So the more rational self-talk is not that I'm bad at everything, but that this one thing is hard for me. And maybe there's a way to do better. The next fallacy is the fallacy of shoulds. And my dear friend Judy told me about this a long time ago and says, you got to stop shoulding on yourself. And I think that we do it. We do it in terms of ourselves and other people and other things. So the fallacy of shoulds is that I should be better. Other people should be kinder or more professional or more present. It shouldn't rain on my wedding day. So shoulds can involve all of the things, whether they're people related or thing related. It shouldn't wash. It shouldn't rain after I've washed my car. I agree. And that's not helpful. I agree that when you go into a place of business, people should be respectful and courteous and attentive. And sometimes they're not going to be. Sometimes they're going to be based on their own shit. They're going to be stuck in their own heads. People are not always going to be kind and considerate. Sometimes those other drivers are dealing with their own emergencies and they're not doing a very good job of paying attention. Of course they should. It's not helpful though. And so a more rational way of thinking is probably that I can only deal with me and that other people have stuff going on that I don't know anything about. And so what is helpful for me to focus on is what I can do and not what I should or shouldn't, what I'm capable of doing at this point in time. So are you shoulding on yourself? The fallacy of helplessness related to hopelessness is the one that frustrates me the most, and the reason that I'm not a counselor, because I'm pretty sure there's a rule that says you can't slap people. And the fallacy of helplessness, and yes, I've engaged in it, makes me want to slap people, including myself. So the fallacy of helplessness is that there is no way out of this tunnel. There is no light at the end. There is nothing that could possibly make it better. We are just stuck. And that's hard for me. It may be hard for you too. Probably you've been in a situation where somebody you love was stuck and you tried to help them, and every suggestion that you made, they were like, no, 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 that won't work. And are there times that things won't work? Absolutely. You get a terminal diagnosis, wishing it to be better isn't going to work. Maybe the doctors are wrong and maybe you can be fixed. Absolutely, that happens. There are times, though, when a situation is final. So you didn't get the job. The person that you thought was your person for the rest of your life doesn't want that. So it can feel helpless. It can feel hopeless. A more rational way of thinking, though, is this feels like there is no way out. And usually there is. And usually I need to give it some time and accept some help. But that very, very, very few things are absolutely hopeless. Or if this is going to be an end-of-life situation, what can I do to make the end of life more palatable? What can I do to make it beautiful, respectful, honorable, as opposed to getting sucked into the helplessness? Super frustrating when it's you, maybe more frustrating when it's somebody that you care about, when you see them struggling in the fallacy of helplessness. And so oftentimes it just helps to think, okay, so realistically, is there something here? Hopefully there is. And finally, the fallacy of catastrophic expectations. Definitely, I've done this one. And I think of it as the domino effect, that no matter what happens, these other bad things are going to happen. I think about, there was a guy in the news who he and his bridal party were flying out for the bachelor and bachelorette parties, and the plane crashed. And then they were like a month later, nobody died. And then they were like a month later flying out for the engagement party, and a tornado hit. And then on the day of the wedding, a hurricane hit. I often think about about this couple, and I hope that their life got all of the bad things out all at once, and it's been magical ever since. I think, though, that many of us feel like we're them, like this fallacy of helplessness is kicking in, and we believe that catastrophe is right around the corner. And I remember being in high school, and I was on the debate team, and I really saw that college, specifically getting a communication scholarship, was my only way to afford college. So college was my way out of deep poverty, which was true. That part was true. The part that's funny looking back on it was I didn't know how to iron very well, and I was convinced that my slightly wrinkled shirt would mean that I would lose all of my debates, and then I would never get into college, and that I would end up living underneath the bridge in a box. And so I just saw those dominoes falling out of place, leading to this huge catastrophe. And yeah, looking back on it now, it's funny, but I do remember being in the midst of it, being absolutely paralyzed with fear that this one thing was going to lead to the ruin of everything else in my life. And if you haven't been there, good. Chances are good, though, that at some point you're going to fall victim to this catastrophic expectation fallacy. And so the way to be more fair to yourself is to say, things look pretty bad right now. And I'm sure there are things I can do to intervene and make the outcome better. And maybe I need to find help doing that. But that this catastrophic result is not predetermined. And so I'm going to find ways to get help and find that light at the end of the tunnel and see what more realistically I can do to negate the bad things that maybe I'm anticipating or that have started to happen. So no, my wrinkled blouse did not result in me losing the debates or prevent me from getting into college, in case you were wondering. So halfway through today's conversation, we're going to talk about the discussion board because it is specifically focused on the more rational thinking and the fallacies we've just talked about. So this week is going to be a little bit different than our previous discussions because your first post is going to be a little bit of self-disclosure. It's going to be the easy one, though. And the second part, halfway through the week, is where the real work is going to come into place. So this time, your first post is going to be the one that I want you to do by Wednesday that looks at an activating event and the self-talk that includes that fallacy. You don't have to identify the fallacy. You just need to be aware that there's one in there. So the example that I gave you earlier, losing my keys would be the activating event. My self-talk was, I'm a total fucking idiot. I remember when I lived in Bakersfield, I really loved to shop at Harris Department Store. And all of my clothes came from there. But I have never been able to be one of those dressed people who the outfit all goes together and my hair and my makeup and my fingernail polish matches my belt, like my friend Judy that I told you about earlier. So when I shopped there, I was never quite dressed well enough, even wearing their clothes, for their customers service people to wait on me. I almost never even got approached. So the store, I remember one night very clearly, the store was empty. So the activating event was, I'm in this empty store with lots of people working in there and no one is talking to me. No one is offering to help me. So I could say, store employees should do a better job of greeting and taking care of customers, which is true and not helpful. So if I'm just thinking that, it's stuck in my own head, I'm going to be unhappy, I'm going to be resentful, I'm going to be whiny, I'm going to complain about it, I'm going to bring it up 25 years later in a podcast. Instead, we'll talk about the instead in a minute. So that would be my activating event and my self-talk. Those store employees should have done a better job taking care of a customer. Okay? So you're done for the first half of the week. The second half of the week, you're going to log in and you're going to look at multiple of your classmates' posts, and you're going to respond to at least 2, and this is where the work is going to come in. So I want you to say things like, another way to think about this is the store employees are trying to wrap up for the night and have a lot of tasks to get done. They should be waiting on you, and they're not. So if you want to get that service, maybe speak up. Or in regards to the keys, you're doing the best you can. You're very busy, and it makes it hard for your brain to remember all of the things like where you put your keys. So you're going to go into the discussion board post, you're going to read your classmates' stuff, and you're going to suggest to 2 of them more rational ways to think. Be sure and word it kindly. So another possible way you could think about it, because we're not going to should on each other, right? Another possible way to think about it is this. And so you try and give the more rational thought. After we've had a chance to give the more rational thoughts, and you can go back and look at what people wrote on yours, what you wrote on theirs as you thought about it, then you're ready to do the simulation journal. So your simulation journal entry is going to take place after you've responded to your classmates' discussion board posts. You're going to put in the topic area, being more rational, on the date that you do it. I expect it to be later on in the week. And was this technique effective? Why or why not? So when you practiced the being more rational thought process, did you feel better? Did it help reduce the intensity or the duration of your emotions? And why or why not? What do you need to remember for the next time you're in a situation like this? And is this skill integrated? Okay, so you've now done your discussion board post times 2. You answered your classmates. We're all done with that. You did your simulation journal entries. So let's talk about systematic desensitization. So, systematic desensitization is for the times when your debilitating emotions are rational. So your textbook talks a lot about when debilitating emotions, those ones that get in the way of you functioning, are irrational, that's how we can address them. I think it's also important to talk about the times when our debilitating emotions are not based on fallacies, that they're based on very rational things. And so let's talk about grief. For most employers in America, when an employee suffers the loss of an immediate family member, they're given 1 to 3 days off work. In 1 to 3 days, you have not wrapped your mind around that grief. You are probably not ready to function even for short periods of time again. This is kind of our relationship with grieving, is that we allot a period of time, nowhere near as much as what's actually needed, and then we expect people to move on. I think about a friend of mine who suddenly lost her husband, and they had 4 young children that needed their mom to function and were dealing with their own grief. And she didn't have time to grieve at all. She not only needed to take care of her kids, she needed to make sure that they had income coming into the household and that everything was functioning. and she needed to not let her grief derail her. And I think that's pretty typical. We have lots of other debilitating rational emotions in Siskiyou County and throughout California and throughout the United States. We have suffered devastating fires. And that grief comes in waves, right? So if you've lost everything to a fire, in the first place, people tell you, well, you didn't lose everything if nobody died. You lost your stuff. And so you lost your home. I remember after the devastating fires that rolled through the area where I work, and that people were getting their feet back underneath them and homes were being rebuilt. And Christmas rolled around, and the number of families that realized for the first time that they'd lost their heirloom Christmas ornaments and were deep in the depths of grief all over again. And so tragic and exhausting and seems like never ending. And that's perfectly rational. That grief is perfectly rational and still debilitating. So, debilitating rational emotions often require you to be able to function. Think about getting a phone call at work that someone I love had died, or one of my kids was in the hospital. Those things required me to be able to function. So when my kid was in the hospital, I needed to be able to get in my car and drive to them and not end up in the hospital with them because I couldn't function. I couldn't focus. And my dear friend Lily died. I got the notice in the middle of class, and my classmates included students who were related to her. We needed to be able to function. And so what I'm going to talk about today is for those times that your grief, your anger, any of your emotions are rational, and we need to pause them so we can function. However, this is really important. If you pause but never get back to, if you pause and ignore those emotions, if you bury them, they fester just like a physical wound, just like an infection. It's going to grow inside you and it's going to eat you alive from the inside. So you can't do that. Yes, you often will need to pause because that's the way life works. Part of this process, though, part of the systematic desensitization is a promise to yourself to deal with it. And so I'm going to talk to you about my system for doing that. And it starts with, right now, pause this video in just a second and start writing down a list of happy thoughts. And you need to do this now because when you're in the middle of some deeply debilitating, intense, rational emotion, your brain isn't going to be able to go there on its own. So you need this list to refer to. So I can think about, I've had so many amazing moments in my life, but some of them are really visual. So I can think about watching the baby turtles being released back into the wild, going their way through the sand, making it to the ocean, and just how watching them was so amazing. I can think about moments with my kids. I can think about moments with my grandkids. So I can think about dancing with my daughter at her wedding. I can think about watching my son earn his awards. I can think about being in the grocery store randomly and hearing the little tiny voice of my middle grandchild screaming, Momo, Momo, and running to me with full open arm joy. All of those moments that I can easily come up with right now, but that I would struggle to come up with if I was in the midst of a really bad thing taking place. I can think about my husband and proposing to me after our marriage ceremony and the absolute joy and delight and silliness that entailed. I can think about so many moments, and I know you can too. So pause this right now, write down at least 10 of them, and then come back to this list, this happy thoughts list, because this will really help you to be in the moment when you need to be in the moment, but also help you to pause when you need to pause. So pause this happy thoughts list for right now. Okay, and put that aside. So you've got your happy thoughts list. You're going to keep adding to it. We're going to put it aside for right now. So what you need to do when you're experiencing a debilitating rational emotion is to say, I'm going to pause this right now until a specific time. So I'm going to put this on pause until this debilitating emotion until 7 p.m. tonight. And at 7 p.m. tonight, I am going to put on the saddest country music. I'm going to put on Taylor Swift's Tortured Poets Department. I am going to look at your Instagram posts featuring your new significant other. I'm going to do whatever wallowing thing I need to do. I'm going to scream. I'm going to cry. All those dishes that I bought at garage sales for a nickel, I'm going to take them out in the backyard and throw them against the fence and break them and scream, assuming, you don't have neighbors who are going to call the police on you. I am going to thoroughly wallow in my anger, in my grief, in my rage for an hour tonight from 7 to 8 p.m. And when the timer goes off, I'm going to dry my tears. I'm going to drink some water and soothe my aching throat. I'm going to clean up the glass I've broken. I am going to put everything away. And I am going to use my happy thoughts list to help me stop thinking about those thoughts. And I'm going to go on about my life until tomorrow night from 7 to 8 p.m. And the next night from 7 to 8 p.m. until I no longer need to do this for an hour every night. And then maybe I'm going to do it for an hour every other night. Or maybe I'm going to do it for half an hour 3 times a week. Or maybe I'm going to do it for 15 minutes once a week. And I'm going to take those steps that I need to take and understand that it's not necessarily going to be a linear process. Understand that I'm going to need to take some additional actions. So maybe I need to delete you from all of my social media accounts and block your number from my phone. Maybe I need to put away, so not easily accessible, those pictures because looking at them is just too hard right now. And understand that, well, I've worked down to 15 minutes once a month, that I might need more time next month, or I might need more time on the anniversary, or I might need more time at Christmas time to wallow in this grief. When I was a kid, my mom had kicked me out and then called me on New Year's Eve to tell me that she had had both of my cats put to sleep. They weren't sick. She just had that done to punish me. I was basically homeless at the time. I was couch surfing with friends. I was under 18, so even though I had a job, it was not a job that paid really well. And I needed to be able to function. I could not grieve over my beloved cats at that time. I needed to really be able to focus. And so I didn't think about it. And I want to say maybe 3 years later, I was driving home from work one night in the work van, and there was a deceased cat on the side of the road. And I started to cry. I had to pull over, and I sat there by the side of the road, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. Because that's what happens, is if you delay those emotions, they are going to fester and they're going to erupt when you're hopefully in a better place and able to deal with them. But they can poison you in the meantime. And so over the years, I've had moments when I have really, and I mean, they were cats, but they were cats that I loved and that I had spent more than a decade with. And they were my source of comfort in a household that didn't have comfort. And so I am still sad today. And that's okay. And if I need to take a minute after this video's done and think about my cats, I will. And if I need to do it again, I will. Because that's the way that you do with systematic desensitization, is you allow yourself time and a place and an amount of time to really feel those emotions. And grief is not something that's ever going to be completely gone. So as an adult, I've had much more significant losses than my cats. My beloved mother-in-law died a number of years ago. And for the last couple of years of her life, one of my great joys was feeding her, is that I would be cooking a meal and be like, oh, Daggy is totally going to love this. And I would be super excited. And then after she died, I remember making a meal and in the middle of thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to love this. And then the realization that, of course, she can't anymore. And just holding on to my husband and sobbing in my grief. And now today, when I'm making a meal that I know she would really have loved, it's sweet. And I just think about how lucky I am to have had her in my life. So I hope that you find a place to heal from your rage, from your grief, from any of the other things that you need to heal from. And that when they sneak back up on you, that you give yourself time to think about them, to allow yourself to feel the things you need to feel, and time to heal. And that although it's not linear, that time to heal will slowly decrease over time. And before I move on, let me put in a word here about therapy. There's all kinds of therapy available to all of you. If you're a student at College of the Siskiyous, we have free therapy available. And feel free to reach out to me if you want help in accessing that. If you're out in the world, there are all kinds of places that are cheap or low cost. But I want to tell you that therapy is a gift. And that having a person who does not have a stake in the game, who doesn't want to push you towards their agenda, that can be that non-judgmental listener, can be life-changing. And I realize that therapy is not going to be in the moment, which is why systematic desensitization can help you when you get that phone call and you still need to be able to function. And I still encourage you, therapy can be super amazing and can help you to heal, certainly faster than you can heal on your own. So I wish for all of you great mental health. As always, I love you. This has been Let's Talk Turkey with Jayne Turk. Hope you have a great day.